All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to Tuleyome's October Nature and You lecture. I'm Jeff Ben, Tuleyome's Education Associate. If you don't know, Tuleyome is a conservation nonprofit based in Woodland, California. Our mission is to engage in advocacy and active stewardship with diverse communities to conserve, enhance, restore, and enjoy the lands in the region. The region that we focus on is the Northern Intercoast Range and the neighboring areas of the Central Valley, and with particular emphasis on the Berryessa Snow Mountain National Monument, which we helped get established and recently helped lead the effort to expand. In addition to our public lands advocacy work, we also do a variety of education programs, including K-12 field trips, natural history articles in our local newsletter and newspapers, and of course, this monthly lecture series. We also do a range of adventures programs, including hikes, trail building days, wildflower tours, and our youth boot bank, which provides free loans of hiking boots to kids. If you'd like to learn more about any of those initiatives or upcoming events, you can head over to our website at tuleyome.org. I've got some of our upcoming events on the screen for you here. This is going to be the last Nature and You lecture of 2024. We'll take a little break for the holiday season, and then we'll be back in January with a lecture from Julia Maloof and Jenny Gremmer of UC Davis on the impacts of climate change on wildflowers, which should be of interest. And so on to tonight's lecture. This lecture series is supported by donations from folks like you. So if you haven't already done so and are able to, we'd greatly appreciate a donation to help support the program. I've got the QR code on the screen for that. This month, we're really lucky to have Tuleyome co-founder Andrew Fulks with us. Andrew is a founder and former board president of Tuleyome and currently serves on our advisory council. With Andrew's leadership, Tuleyome successfully preserved 4,000 acres of biologically important properties across 4 different counties, protected over 30,000 acres of public lands as federal wilderness, 31 miles of Cache Creek as a state wild and scenic river, as well as the 330,000 plus acres of the Berryessa Snow Mountain National Monument. As his day job, Andrew is the assistant director of the UC Davis Arboretum and Public Garden, managing naturalized lands on campus, including the Puda Creek Reserve, as well as the Arboretum. And tonight he'll be talking about hiking in the Berryessa Snow Mountain National Monument. During the talk, we do ask that you keep your microphones on mute and hold any questions you might have until the end, and we'll have plenty of time for Q&A with Andrew. All right, with that, take it away, Andrew.
All right. Thank you, Jeff. Got a large room here tonight, so that's great. So as Jeff said, I'm Andrew Fulks, one of the founders of Tuleyome and huge advocate of getting outdoors. When I first moved to this area, the first thing I asked was basically, where can I go? And living in Davis, it was a city and a field. You go to the edge of town and it's all agriculture crops and it's all flat. I needed some elevation, I needed some altitude. So one of the first things I did was start poking around in the mountains, exploring to our west, Cold Canyon, Cache Creek, Blue Ridge, trying to figure out every nook and cranny that I could legally go into, every piece of public land up there. And the more that I went up there, the more I fell in love with the place and wanted to preserve it. And that's where Tuleyome started, myself and a group of others who felt that way about the place that we were visiting and spending so much time in. So this talk is to give you guys a lot of overview of places you can go and hopefully spark some of that interest to go and start poking around on the hills up there. A lot of it is really what I call undiscovered country, despite the fact that we've been working on this for over 20 years. It's got a weird niche in California. It's a little bit further from the Bay Area, so most folks have nearby open space parks and things in the Bay, so they'll visit those if time is short. The Sierra, of course, is so widely known, internationally that people are drawn to that, and we've got places like Yosemite and Lake Tahoe, these destination places that have already had the infrastructure built up and the history of people recreating there. And we fall in this kind of in-between space, right? We're not really the coast. We're not the valley. We're not the Sierra. We're the northern intercoast range, and so we're really hot in the summer and cool in the winter. But the beauty of this place is that you can visit here 4 seasons, and there's always something to do. So what I'm going to do is share my screen here and pull up Google Earth. And I pull up Google Earth because I'm a landscape architect and I like to think of things at different scales. And my favorite scale is to start off zoomed really far out and looking at the context of the region and the geology of the region, and then zooming in to those specific areas that I like to visit. The monument's huge. It's 100 miles long. It's 330,000 acres. We won't cover every square foot today, but I will give you enough of an intro. And when I'm done here, I'm going to post a link in the chat, and that link will take you to the file that I am sharing tonight. I won't turn on every layer tonight because it gets a little overwhelming, but this file in itself is shared on Google Drive, open to the public, anyone with the link, and it contains the monument boundaries, all of the trails that I have personally mapped, all of the trails the Mendocino National Forest has mapped, number of overlays of federal, state, UC land, roads, trails, campgrounds, OHV areas, um, pretty much everything that I have compiled over the years, wilderness boundaries, etc. So we're going to start off, and please bear with me if the Google Earth crashes, I will restart it. Sometimes I think it's because I have so much stuff that I pack into this thing that it struggles sometimes, the weight of all the information. So we'll start out here around the Central Valley, Davis, Sacramento, Santa Rosa, Sonoma region. So I'm swirling around with my magical computer hand here. And the first thing I'm going to do is overlay the Berryessa Snow Mountain boundaries. So this here is the national monument. You can see it's quite a length. If we say Sacramento's down here and Chico's up here, that's flatland and that's about an hour and a half drive. Think about how long that is and how much land that is to explore and how long a trek that would be if one were to go in and hike or drive that monument. One of the neat things about this segment north of 20 is that all of the roads across here are dirt roads that cross the national forest. And if you go south through here, there's only a handful of roads that cross the southern portion of the monument. So it's extremely remote relative to its location so close to Sacramento and the greater metropolitan region of Sac, Roseville, Folsom, and even the Bay Area, which quite a few communities are within a couple hours drive of the monument. So to start off, I'm going to say, the southern area, which is near and dear to my heart, the Cold Canyon area. I think most people, when they first experience this, experience it through Cold Canyon. I know that I did, particularly because it was the closest to where I live, and Highway 128 is a very easy access to get into the monument. So this southern end of the monument here, this encompasses land in the center that is UC Davis land. That's not part of the monument, but within the surrounding areas, we have Bureau of Land Management lands that go across the ridges and include parts of Wild Horse Canyon. Wild Horse Canyon back here has some amazing waterfalls. This is an area that does not have any trails into it. You have to go off trail, and that's generally rock hopping up the creek. And so you go up Cold Canyon up the trail, and when you cross Wild Horse Canyon at the or cross Cold Canyon at the Wild Horse Canyon confluence. You then go off trail and boulder hop about a half mile up and find that waterfall that you just saw. So this trail here is the main loop that a lot of people take. It's interesting. We have Blue Ridge that continues along the length of our uh, mountain range here, and there's two Blue Ridge trails. There's the Blue Ridge Trail at Cold Canyon, and then there's the Blue Ridge Trail that starts at Cache Creek, and I will look at both of those. Tuleyome was able to acquire uh, this parcel in here, which was the Cold Canyon headwaters, one of our first acquisitions, or not our first, but one of. And then more recently acquired this piece in here, the Huber Ranch, 160 acres, and that protects the upper watershed of Cold Canyon. So all that view shed that you see when you walk up, all of the water draining into Cold Creek proper, all of that land is now protected. Now, as part of that, we were able to build Annie's Trail that gives you an extra couple mile loop. And Annie's Trail, it's vigorous. You know, it's not as hard when there's a trail there, but when I had to build it, it was a little bit of work. I remember army crawling underneath the brush, and it was right about here where I came face to face with the fattest rattlesnake I think I've ever seen, and I slowly army crawled back away from that. And so the trail routing in that particular location avoids an area I saw a snake. That's one of those like weird little quirks. Um, the views from Annie's Trail are pretty spectacular. You go further south along the ridge, you look out into the larger open expanse of Berryessa, and you can see it in the distance there with Big Island. And there's this beautiful, almost three-story tall rock outcropping that sticks out of the edge of the cliff that the little spur trail will take you to go on. Now, the whole Berryessa area has lots of opportunity. I'm talking about most of the mountain zones, but Tuleyome built a 7 mile long shoreline trail on the furthest north end. And the views from that trail are pretty spectacular because you're looking back along the lake in the more what I call the calm portion of the lake. It's the furthest from the resorts, and so it tends to have a lot less boating activity. It's also shallower, so folks don't like to do the jet skiing, water skiing there as much because there can be obstacles underneath as the lake level changes. So it's kind of the quiet side of the lake. Uh, all of these locations that we're talking about around this area within the monument, you can find on Tuleyome's webpage. We have a section for trails with trail descriptions and maps and things like that as well. The other one I want to talk about in this area, and you can see there's quite a few, you know, maps or trails as we start getting further and further north, is the Berryessa Peak Trail. And the Berryessa Peak Trail, this one's pretty near and dear to my heart. You know, we did a lot of projects, this organization, and the one that really did the most for me was one of the main motivators for starting the organization. And that was the fact that all of this portion of the monument that you see here, this long stretch along the ridgeline, was inaccessible to the public. It was landlocked, which means it was surrounded by private ranches. So all the ranches all around here, uh, no roads going through, no public roads. And so there was no way to access this public land. Drove me crazy. Worked on a multiple fronts over 15 years to try and find a way up here that we could legally get up here. And when John and Judy Aumann, two ranchers on this side of the mountain range, they owned this little piece right up here on the ridge. And they also owned the land on the south side, or rather the west side, uh, on the bottom of your screen. Because this trail needed to cross at a corner over here. So this corner right here was the intersection between state lands and federal lands. And so because of that, you had this area where, click this here, there we go. This area where you had a bit of a checkerboard, right? A corner crossing. And you can't legally cross at a corner, although there's litigation and some recent court rulings that kind of put that in the realm of possibility, but that's more in the Intermountain West. But the technicality that we were operating under was that you need to get permission or an easement or something to go through the small bit of private land right there at that intersection. And so the Almonds happen to own both this corner crossing and this parcel of land right here. And when we approached them, uh, they said, you know what? John Almond said, I'm an Eagle Scout. More kids need to get outdoors. And so we'll donate an easement. And at that point, they donated this little half-mile section right here and the corner crossings that we needed. And because of that, we were able to build the Berryessa Peak Trail. And Berryessa Peak Trail uh, gives us access to the summit, to the Berryessa Peak that you can see for most of the Central Valley, at least until you get up to maybe Oroville, and it starts to get lost in the other mountains that you see to your west. But getting to this summit had been kind of like a lifelong dream of mine, and by getting that easement, it gave us the connectivity to then be able to build this trail. And working with the Bureau of Land Management, we were able to complete the rest of this segment, getting us all the way to the summit of Berryessa Peak, which gives these unparalleled views of both the Central Valley, the Capay Valley, as well as Lake Berryessa. And I think one of the most rewarding things about working on this, as well as hiking it later, is coming across people with their families hiking up there and enjoying something that they'll be able to enjoy for the rest of their lives, as well as future generations. I encourage you to do that when it's a rough trek. It's 7.5 miles each direction, a little over 3,000 foot elevation gain, no water. So wintertime is the best time to do that, and very early spring. Once it starts getting into the 60s, I'm like, I'm done because it's all a south-facing slope. It gets pretty warm. But in the wintertime, absolutely precious time to get up there. I've camped out in December up there and it's 38 degrees out and it just feels amazing because the sun's hitting you from that low altitude in the sky. So really nice trail. Further up on this side of the ridge, moving into the heart of the monument, um, Zim Waterfall. If you haven't gone to Zim Falls, you gotta go to Zim Falls. It's this 100-foot waterfall in the Central Valley, right? So, or rather in the Intercoast Range, that's rain fed. Okay, it's not snow melt. So the fact that you've got a Northern Intercoast Range waterfall that runs generally, into end of May, is a pretty spectacular thing. So I'd really advise doing this. It's about 3.5 miles in, about a 7 mile round trip, but the Zim Falls, and you can kind of see it in the notch here, right? It's like there's the valley behind that's draining it, and then this is the location where the waterfall cascades down in between these big rock outcroppings. And there's really good views of the waterfall from along the trail, and you can also scramble down the slopes to the base and see it right from the bottom. Uh, beautiful hike. You cross the Zim Creek 9 times. So prepare to get your feet wet or wear, amphibious shoes or sneakers you don't mind getting wet. The beauty of it, though, is that you're walking up the valley the whole way. So the total elevation gain for the hike is about 400 feet over that 3.5 miles. So it's a fairly easy hike. Distance wise, it's a little bit more than most people might be interested in doing, but 7 mile round trip that's almost level. It's pretty nice. The wildflowers up here are fantastic. So I always think an April trip is usually the best, a March or April. There's also further up Knoxville Road is the Long Canyon Loop. And now this one's kind of fun because it takes you to the watershed divide between Puda Creek and Cache Creek. So you can actually walk right to this little low spot in the mountain range, and you can look down, and you're looking all the way down to Glasscock Mountain, Fisk Peak, um, and every drop of water that falls on the north side of this, that flows down into Cache Creek, and every drop of water that falls on the south side flows into Puda Creek, ultimately, and Lake Berryessa, coming down Edicuria Creek. This is one of those that, everything, of course, was hit by the fires that we've had, both LNU, County Fire, and some of the others. But the vegetation's come back pretty well. Some of the trees were heavily impacted, but the scrub brush has come back. And a lot of the trees that were not so densely spaced did fine. So there's still quite a bit to see up there from a vegetation standpoint. Now I'm going to jump over into one of my I'll probably keep saying one of my favorite places because I think all of them are, and that's kind of the problem when I'm trying to choose. So I'm like, I'm just going to walk through all of it. Um, Valley Vista Regional Park is one that Tuleyome has been working on for a number of years. It's a parcel acquired by Yolo County that includes land both on the north side of Highway 16 and also on the south side. And when the county acquired this, I'm still on the county parks committee, and I was able to broker an introduction between the American Land Conservancy, which had an option to purchase this property, and Yolo County Parks that were looking to expand their park offerings. And this was paid for with two state grants. So county money was not involved. We were able to get two state grants successfully. However, we didn't have the funds to build the trails. So Tuleyome has been building the trails. In fact, all the trails up there have been built by Tuleyome or Tuleyome projects. So there's a new one that Nate Lilje, who's our Trails and Outdoor Adventures coordinator, built. That's a smaller 1 mile loop that doesn't take you up quite so high, but you still get high enough to get great views of the creek down there. This is right next to the park at the creek proper. And see, this is looking up from the creek, up the hillside. The switchbacks, the Valley Vista portion of it, takes you up to this little spot up here at the top of the switchbacks, where sitting at the top, waiting for you, is a picnic table. And that was an Eagle Scout project. And from that picnic table, you can look down and see the Cape Valley from the upper end. It's just spectacular views. But you can also look out into the valley itself, and you can make out the Sutter Buttes that are out here. And so being able to get up that high that quickly is pretty exciting within the Cape or the upper end of the Cape Valley. We've since then built a backside loop trail that allows you to go off the edge here and connect up with the existing route that is a fire break that comes up from Highway 16, thus allowing you to make a lasso loop. And we more recently built this extension further back to make an even larger loop. But this one needs trail maintenance because we built this right after the LNU fire. So the ground was clear. We did all the earthwork and grading. And then I was not able to go up and do maintenance on that because I had to go in and get spinal fusion back surgery. So I've been out of operation for 2 years on this. But now that I'm back, in business, I'm going to be up here reopening this segment of the loop. And then this one that you see here is not yet completed. This is one that we are scouting and going to be actively building. That's a loop around this particular smaller canyon, which also has some really nice waterfalls, but some pretty rugged terrain. So I've got to find the optimum route. And these in blue are potential future routes that would connect us up with the Blue Ridge Trail proper that takes you to Fisk Peak up here, and one that goes from Rumsey Knobs. So the stuff in orange is existing. And there's a little bit of a fire break that goes part of the way up here. And then you need to bushwhack to complete this. So these are on our to-do list to work with the Bureau of Land Management and create these connectors. And that'll give you even more opportunity for hiking loops in this area. So talking about the Blue Ridge Trail, again, A lot of times when people think Blue Ridge Trail, they think Cold Canyon, and I think about this one that goes up from Highway 16 and the new low water bridge that's there that takes you up about 3,000 feet up to Fisk Peak proper, and it will continue going to the south. Uh, but it's gotten kind of brushy because it's been harder for folks to be able to get back there to do maintenance while the bridge was out. Weren't able to get large crews of people to drive up Ray House Road. However, Ray House Road is a really good road that's open for off-road vehicles like dirt bikes and ATVs, and it's perfectly suited for that. It is a graded road, the historic road that used to take you up to the old Quicksilver mines up here, and will also take you down Langs Peak Road all the way down to Buck Island. And Buck Island is a BLM camp right on the upper ends of Cache Creek, right at the edge of the wilderness. There's two pit toilets and outhouses, but it is a remote going to get there. So you pretty much have to be on like an ATV or a dual sport motorcycle. Some Jeeps and things have made it from the Lake County side, coming up the road here, but a lot of that really depends on the condition of this road, and it frequently gets landslides. So it's never a guarantee you're going to be able to get up there. So I always say, go with an adventurous spirit and accept that if you have to turn around, sometimes you have to turn around. We are working with the BLM in Yolo County on trying to get them to return to grading this road back in 2010 when they stopped grading this road after the bridge was condemned. They basically hadn't graded it since then, with the exception of whenever CAL FIRE would go in and grade it whenever there's a wildfire back there. But those improvements would only last, a year or so, because they aren't designed for road standards. They were designed for emergency access. So now that the bridge has been replaced, there's the possibility of access in there, but we're trying to re-educate all of the staff at the county that this is something they used to do. It was just 14 years ago, and unfortunately, all the people that made the decisions to close it off or stop grading it because of the bridge being out are no longer with the county. So that institutional knowledge is gone, and we're working on trying to reestablish that. Then I can't leave this region and get up into the myriad of trails up here in the Bear Creek unit of the Cache Creek Natural Area without talking about Glasscock Mountain. Glasscock Mountain is, you've probably seen it if you're anywhere on the other ridges where you enter the entrance into the canyon. It's that steep face right here, that rock face, extremely steep to get at it from this side. A route that I've used that I really like is Billy's Hill. If you go up Highway 16 and you pass the county line, you get to a portion right here where you'll actually see a Berryessa Snow Mountain National Monument sign. Very, very wide pullout. If you park there and hop the gate on the other side and walk up to the top of Billy's Hill, that takes you to a long, broad ridge that gives you a nice shallow gradient up to Cortina Ridge. And from Cortina Ridge, you can follow the fire break along the ridge top and make it all the way out to Glasscock Mountain right here. And this is all on Bureau of Land Management, BLM land right here, even on this side, including Billy's Hill. So all fully open to the public. Then there's the Cache Creek Ridge Trail. And Cache Creek Ridge Trail is probably the premier trail of the Bear Creek unit. So in 1999, the Bureau of Land Management purchased all of the land. I think it was about 13,000 acres from Cache Creek Ridge all the way to Highway 16 and all the way to Highway 20. So this area that I'm outlining here had been a private ranch. And so getting to all the BLM land on Cache Creek was very difficult because this was basically precluding access from the highway. So there were a couple ways you could get in. You could come in from Judge Davis Trail that would get you down here, but getting into the heart of any of this area, because there are old ranch roads and things that come down, was very difficult. And the opportunity for recreation that wasn't quite so vertical or so chaparral filled was difficult. So the Land and Water Conservation Fund paid for this acquisition with some assistance from the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation and opened up about 70 miles of old ranch roads, now turned into trails, to create all kinds of loops and paths that you can take throughout this area of the Bear Creek unit. And the Cache Creek Ridge Trail runs along the monument edge right there at the ridgetop proper. And then from there, you can drop down into any of these side canyons and follow those around. There's some gorgeous lakes and things back here. Um, some are seasonal and some are spring fed and are perennial. I've enjoyed swimming in all of them. There's large open flats with blue oaks in there looking back onto this is an area known as Brushy Sky High, which is above Cache Creek. And overnight camping is allowed in here. People love to horseback. Um, let's see, I've got a campgrounds map here. So it's part of this layer, all of the official campgrounds, right? So that's not just, remote dispersed camping, which is allowed in this area, particularly as you head to the north. But official named designated camps are in this data set. And so from the cowboy camp, a lot of people who like horseback riding will start and they'll follow along Bear Creek, and then they will, which this is actually a pretty cool part of Bear Creek because right where you cross over to go in there, there's this rock ledge. And if you go in there in early spring, you can swim under this ledge and it goes like 5 feet back behind it with a cascade of water in the front. So I say go seek that out. And then Judge Davis Trail. Now, the difference between these, the color coding, this one is a wilderness trail. So the orange is open only to equestrian and foot traffic, whereas everything over here that's in the purple is open to mountain bikes, non-motorized. So mountain bikes, hiking, horses in this area. And you can ride along the ridgetop just outside the wilderness boundary. But if you want to go for the wilderness experience, going down either the Judge Davis Trail or the Redbud Trail into Wilson Valley. And Wilson Valley is a broad, flat valley at the confluence of Rocky Creek and Cache Creek. And it's in the heart of the wilderness area. So this is a federally designated wilderness, one of Tuleyomy's projects that we got this designated as an official wilderness area. And great place for early winter, late fall backpacking. Basically, before Cache Creek and Rocky Creek, because the main point is over here at Baton Flat, where right here, where you've got to cross. And look at that. So it's a picture of a fish catch on at Baton Flat. This area can be really impossible to cross during the wintertime. So that really cuts off most of the Cache Creek Wilderness trails that are on that side. But if you go before we start getting really heavy rains and you get a lot of runoff, it's very easy to, it's literally just, rock hop across, very easy. So I always say check the flows coming out of the dam at Clear Lake, because the dam at Clear Lake cruise up here. This controls the water coming out of Clear Lake and what comes down into the wilderness area. And so the releases at Clear Lake will tell you how much is coming down. And then anything that's over maybe 150, 200 CFS, I wouldn't cross it at that point. But it generally stays well under that into, December. So highly recommend going in there and checking that out. All right, we're going to start moving to some other points north. And the nice thing again about having this as a Google Earth file is, you can put in place marks in here and export them to Google Maps, and then you can use those in Google Maps when you're trying to get route directions from wherever it is you live to the trailheads. So I always recommend taking the data and then just going out there and starting to have fun with it. Now, as we go north of Highway 20, we go into the area formerly known as Walker Ridge, still known as Walker Ridge Road, but what is called Moyakaluluk, which is the Patwin or Putwin term for Condor Ridge, because condors used to fly on this ridge. And this is part of the addition to the national monument. So you'll see this area around here is the more recent addition that added all of this BLM federal land to the monument. And this area has a tremendous amount of roads, many of which are sort of what we call non-official, meaning some, unfortunately, were created by off-highway vehicles that went down fire breaks, like those on the west side of the ridge. Then others were the result of historic gold and mercury mining up here. And so you can see a lot of those on the maps. And I have hiked or mountain biked all of these, and it's really a special place back there from a geological standpoint, from a plant species standpoint. This is one of those where I say, grab your GPS, go out and explore, because there are areas like down here um, at Deadshot Flat where there are mineral springs, and you can see very obvious examples of them here in the satellite photo, where all of this looks like something, in a national park, Yellowstone or something like that, because you have mineral springs bubbling up from the ground and staining all of the rocks, a bright orange with all the biological activity coming out of there, or areas that are white or yellow, depending on if there's manganese or sulfur in the water, and that all of that's precipitated out as it's gone through its cycles, because some of these are fed by runoff, or the springs charge more after winter and bubble up. This particular one is kind of interesting because it's a seleno-sulfur spring. So it's a salty sulfur spring that's also carbonated. So I've put this water in my mouth and I haven't swallowed it because it's just, pure salt. But it's the weirdest sensation to have like a salt bubbling on your tongue, and then I rinse my mouth out and spit it out, keep on going. The whole side of the mountain range here, if you look at the USGS quad maps, you will see this area littered with natural springs. Some are warm. There's no hot springs that are on the public land. The hot springs are down at Wilbur Hot Springs, right down here. But they vary in their temperatures. Some are lukewarm, some are, ice cold. Some, like over here on the Cold Spring Mountain Camp, these springs here are extremely fresh. They come out of the ground up here and then up here, and then they're underground, and then they pop up again and then create these areas of wet meadows with lots of native plants in them. And this is ice cold water that's just super pure. And then you go to the other side and you've got, a salt spring that you wouldn't want to drink. I'm fascinated by the variety of natural springs up here and the different qualities of the water. Some of them have almost a milky color in the water from different bacteria and minerals. And this history of the mining up there has created all of these little routes that one can poke around and explore. I've even found old foundations and chimneys from some of the outbuildings of the mining that used to go on out there. So it's, again, just part of the history of this land that goes back tens of thousands of years of human habitation to the present day, and being able to see some of the impacts of that, but also just able to enjoy the natural and wild areas that have persisted throughout the years. The area to the north is where we start getting into the transition from Bureau of Land Management, which has been most of what we've been looking at, into the national forest. And so let me scroll down here and turn on some of those roads and trails. So the roads are in yellow, and those are the Mendocino National Forest roads. And what's interesting about some of them is that you will find gaps, and you'll be like, well, why do I have, a road that looks like this, right? Or sort of seemingly ends. Sometimes that's because that's as far as the public road goes before it hits a private inholding and you can't go through. Other times it's because the roads are actually county roads. So like Bartlett Springs Road right here goes up the North Fork of Cache Creek, becomes Twin Valley Road, and continues into the Mendocino National Forest. These are all public roads, but these show up on county road maps. This Pinnacle Rock Trail access, this is a short trail that takes you up to a nice rock outcropping. You can see the person in this image. They're only this high, so you can see how big that rock is. Gives you really good vistas of the surrounding valleys, both back toward Clear Lake as well as the Mendocino. But this is the Forest Service Road coming off of the county road. And a lot of these roads built by the county were built to access either the mines or the mineral springs. Back in the 1800s. So there's quite a mix of those that come up here and then eventually intersect with or become the Forest Service roads. So if you've got a 4x4, the Mendocino is probably one of the best places to explore the forest by vehicle to get to some really remote trailheads. There's a number of campgrounds in here and on this map. Some, like Cedar Camp, are still closed because of the ranch fire that went through there, uh, tore through the whole of the Mendocino. But some of the infrastructure was damaged in some of these camps, and so some are still closed. Let's Lake has reopened. That's one of the more popular ones because Let's Lake is a very, very pretty high mountain lake that, let's see if we've got some photos of that. Really good. It's non-motorized, so going out on canoe and kayak. Uh, there's not a lot of lakes in the Northern Intercoast Range. People are so used to, just lakes everywhere in the Sierra, right? Um, so having a lake in the Intercoast Range is kind of a special thing, and people love to go up there and camp or spend the day up there. And the road up there, generally, I like to come in from M10, which is coming up from Fouts Spring and comes in from Stony Ford. So you can see Stony Ford here. You come in on M10, and then that will take you up to Let's Lake. So great place for families, and it has some small trails around the lake, so you can do small hikes. And then you'll see a number of these other trails. Now, most of these are multi-use, so you may come across mountain bikers, uh, side-by-sides, ATVs, things like that. The thing about the Mendocino is, it's over 1 million acres. There's so much room up here for everybody. So even though there are uh, basically every user you can imagine when you get into the non-wilderness areas of the Mendocino, you really don't have user conflict because you're so spread out. And I've just found that yeah, everyone up there is having a good time, and it's all smiles and waves up there. So definitely check out the Let's Lake area if you're wanting to do some camping, and that's good sort of all season. Even in the summer when it gets kind of hot up here, having a lake nearby is a great location. Then we're going to move on to this area. So you notice how there's the orange again here. And that's because the Snow Mountain Wilderness right here, it's got two segments with bisected by the road that takes you up to the Crockett Trailhead. So there's a north and a south side. But all of these are just horse or pedestrian trails that you see here in orange. And Snow Mountain, its namesake mountain, it's the Snow Mountain. Um, there's high meadows up there. So it's at alpine elevations. It's, I believe, almost 8,000 feet, uh, which makes for a really big temperature difference. Like if you go up there in May, it might be 95 degrees down in Stony Ford. And when you get up to the top of Snow Mountain, it might be 45, 50 degrees. It's that different. I spent overnight on May 10th a number of years ago. And man, that was a cold night, but it was literally 95 down in the valley. And I think it was 65 by the time we got up to the summit. But there's a lot of I would say vistas because that seems to be the thing I'm always seeking. It must be why I'm always walking the ridges. But I was just always impressed at the views out there. You can look all the way down into the Central Valley. At night, the Central Valley is really interesting because you have little pockets of light where the towns are, and then the rest of it's all black because it's agriculture, with a grid of occasional lights, and those are sort of the grid of the county roads, right? North, south, east, west, as cars travel on them. And then you see these lines of cars, and that's I-5 basically. And then you can look across the valley and you'll see a line of cars, but it's not flat. And you realize that that's I-80 starting to go up into the Sierra slowly. And so it's just off of the horizontal plane. And it's really interesting to be up there at night and be pitch black everywhere and just a grid of lights down below you. Uh, so it always makes me appreciate the darkness of the wild places up here. And now that's near the northern boundary of the national forest. You can hit quite a few points north. My data set includes all, or I'm sorry, the boundary of the national monument. The national forest continues to the north. My data set includes trails and roads and campgrounds for the entirety of the Mendocino, and then includes some of the Yola Middle Eel Wilderness as well. Um, and you can see these, again, non-motorized trails as well as the wilderness boundaries within this data set. So let's see here. Let me get to my, uh, there we go, move this out. And in the chat, I'm going to, that's right, I rebooted, so bear with me here. My Google Drive here to grab my link. All right. So this link should give you the download. It's says right now 6.6 megabytes, and that includes all of the information of everything that I've shared tonight. Uh, leave most of the layers are off because there's a lot of overlapping stuff. In fact, you want to see how crazy I get with my data acquisition. It's like just wait for me to turn everything on, and then you'll see like that's all of the layers. I think I even have a couple image files that are in there as well. Um, so it's got the land ownership for the lower portions. It's got the roads, the trails, the campgrounds, a number of gates where gates are on some of the roads, um, wilderness boundaries. I think I've even got, yeah, there's some scans coming in slowly of the, yes, there we go. I had an overlay of the Mendocino National Forest maps to show the private inholdings within the public lands. So quite a lot of data there. It's one of those, just tell folks, get out, explore. The only way I was able to experience all these places was a lot of trips into the mountains and a lot of dead ends. So in order to be able to find out my favorite places and places to go, there were a lot of trips where I get up there and I go, well, that was a bust, but at least I learned something and it gave me like, oh, I saw another place I want to explore the next time. So I've been up there, oh gosh, so many times since I moved here in 1990. So that entire time I've been spending most of my vacation free time up in the northern Coast Range in Tuleyome's area of operation, just trying to get to know every little nook and cranny and corner of it. And I'd encourage other folks to do the same. In the summer, it can get really hot. So I say one of the more fun things to do is kayak in Cache Creek, putting in at Highway 20 and floating down to Highway 16 through the wilderness. That is a spectacular summer kayak run. It's class 2 water. There's only one class 3 at the very end, and it's a marginal class 3. I did that one 3 times this summer. Finally got back in groove, post surgery, and was within about 20, 30 feet of a massive bear when I was floating down. It was walking along the edge of Cache Creek in the middle of the wilderness, and we were coming from upstream, and the sounds of the rapids and the water, the bear didn't hear us, and we were downwind from the bear, so the bear didn't smell us. And right when we got into the end of the rapid, the bear turned and looked at us and took off crashing through the brush. I've seen more bear in my life in Cache Creek than anywhere in the Sierra. And I visited Sierra since I was about 3 years old, and have still only seen, I think, two bear in the Sierra. And I think I'm up to about eight in Cache Creek, which is pretty good. They're wily. Mom and cubs, large individual adults, far away, nearby. And all are that I've seen have been untagged, so they're not anything that had been released there or otherwise captured and studied. So it's a pretty wild space. The only thing I have not seen is a mountain lion, so that I'm still waiting for that one. And I've seen the tracks, but I just have not seen the mountain lion. So with that, Jeff, I think we'd open up to any questions folks might have either in the chat or you can moderate.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, thanks for a great talk. Always enjoy touring the monument through Google Earth. Um, and so, if folks have questions, you can either put them in the chat, and I can relay them to Andrew, or if you want to unmute yourself or raise your hand and ask through Zoom, you can do that. I'll start off. So,
Yeah, let's see.
thinking
One, well, there's
about,
one, there's
oh, there we go.
before you
Yeah.
jump into that, we do have one in there. So have you seen any elk? Oh my goodness, yes. Uh, the funny thing about me and elk, a lot of people, they're like, oh yeah, they were right by the highway. I drove by Highway 20. I drove by Highway 16. Oh, they were just there at cowboy camp. I've seen elk every time I'm from the road. I never see elk from the road. I got to be like way, way back in the deep backwoods, and then I see elk all the time. And every single time I drop off Highway 16 or 20 and I'm looking for elk, I don't see elk. And then Bob Schneider will go by and he'll be like, "Oh yeah, I saw elk last weekend, right off the side of the road." I'm like, "Oh my goodness, that yeah, it's like they know." My most recent elk sighting was last winter. I was hiking the Bear Creek unit of the Cache Creek Natural Area, and I was walking back to the trailhead, and they were up on the hillside in the brush, and yeah, it's gorgeous. Um, then my wife and I, 2 years ago, were kayaking down Cache Creek through the wilderness section, just past the confluence with the main stem and with the North Fork, and nine nice Tule elk were walking through the brush with one big bull in the front, followed by the eight females, and those are really, really close to the water. Um, and then I've seen them back in the Bear Creek unit a bunch, up on Cache Creek Ridge, numerous times down in the lower part of Cache Creek, in the wilderness section. But what I have not seen, and I ask you to go and take a look for, is there is a donkey that lives with the elk in the herd in Cache Creek. And it was a pack mule that escaped and ran away and was adopted by the herd. And there's videos on YouTube of it where it's basically it's part of the family now. And so it yeah, it works out, pretty well. Oh, I
Yeah,
see
it's
someone here said they had a
Diesel the donkey.
Diesel the donkey. Someone here said they had a file from a previous version of Google Earth. Now that's interesting. So, because that's the file I'm using. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to save this as a place, and I'm going to re-upload it as we speak. And I'm going to call this BSM Roads and Trails 4-24. And then I will replace that.
So while you're doing that, I put a link in the chat a little while ago. Tuleyome is leading a hike up on Moloch Loyak in November. So if folks want to get out and see some of that geologically interesting country Andrew was talking about, we'd be happy to show you around.
So much serpentine up there. It's gorgeous, nice and like smooth soapstone. Um,
Hmm.
all right, let me see here. Copy link. It's fun. We can do this in real time here. And Bert, there we go. All right, that should be good. All right, so yes, so the question was, how do we copy or have access to that data set link that all the maps and such are in? I just posted the link. So I'm glad that we found that the old one, because that has been there a little while, that I must not have updated it with the most recent one, because I've been using it local for so long and shared it so many years ago. This is a more recent updated version, so should work. A little bit bigger file though, it's about 19 megs. So that seems to be small now. I took like one photograph with my cell phone the other day and it was that large. So I think our expectation of what a large file is has changed over the years.
Sure has, yeah.
So you said, Jeff, that you had a question.
I do, yeah. So, folks are thinking about, getting up into the Mendocino to, maybe try to go hike Snow Mountain or explore some of these other areas. Do you have any recommendations in terms of trip planning? So, let's say we've got a Subaru versus a four-wheel drive, or which roads are open or not.
Yeah.
Is Google Maps reliable? Should we be calling the ranger offices? What's the
So there's a couple ways to do this. And I realized that folks asked the link not showing in the chat. It was a direct message before, and so I just updated it to an all group chat. So there's a number of places that I do to figure out the roads. Okay. So one is the data set that I have. If you click on the Mendocino National Forest data set, it will actually um, oh, somebody's still got an error of saying it's not the old version of Google Earth, which is odd because I'm using the most current version of Google Earth on a new computer. So you might try, let me see, I'll do one other thing. I'll save it as a KML instead of a compressed KMZ because there are converters that will convert, save that as a KML and then try that again. Yeah, because I am using the most recent version of Google Earth, and the build date was February 22nd of this year uh, on a new computer, so that's strange. But like I say, I will upload another version and try that as an uncompressed KML. Right, go uncompressed. Okay. All right. Okay, here's another one to try. And then there's also trying to open it like open Google Earth first and then open the file. But that's an odd thing because I've never had that problem when I've traded this file with quite a few other people. So let's see. Oh, yes. So going back to your question. So in that data set, if you click on any of the roads that are in there, they are classified. There's a large group of metadata. So a window will pop open. And in fact, let me go to that and just show you what it looks like when you do that. So if you're looking at the Mendocino National Forest roads, for example, right? If I click on this, it gives a whole bunch of stuff, right? It doesn't tell you the name of the road. They've got some interesting ones. Then it will have this section that says operator maintenance level. So this one says 3, suitable for passenger
Mm.
cars. It'll tell you the surface type. There are some that will tell you high clearance vehicles, for example, right? So this helps. Now, to get actual road conditions, what you want to do is you want to go to the Mendocino National Forest webpage, and they actually have a uh, roads and trails section, and that will tell you current road status. However, if the current road status is several months old, call the district office because uh, those conditions can change rapidly in the wintertime. It snows up there, so there'll be times where the roads are closed for snow. You know, there's no way to get back there, particularly the trailhead at Summit Springs. Um, yeah, there's just you can snowshoe in, which people do. In fact, there's a guy who's got a YouTube channel. He split boards up there, where you basically split boarding is a snowboard that is cut down the center lengthwise and turns into cross-country skis. And then when you get to the top of wherever it is you are, you latch it together and then move your bindings over, and then it's snowboard time. So he climbs to the top of Snow Mountain and then snowboards down and then climbs again and snowboards down. And unfortunately, I discovered the existence of this when I was like, I'm too old to take on another hobby, but I wish I'd known about this in my 20s. So the amount of things you can do up there is pretty spectacular. People like to launch hang gliders off Hole Mountain and Sanhedrin. Um, yeah, when we started doing the monument campaign, the amount of users and constituents to bring into the coalition was pretty tremendous, that we didn't really expect, but that was kind of the idea, right? Everyone loves this place. Everyone wants to preserve it. So bring everybody in and let's keep using it in the nice, non-destructive outdoor environmental ways that we're using it. And the off-road vehicle people were behind it. Because they enjoy the outdoors as well, right? And they want to be on legal routes. So let's see the parts of the family members who are elderly but love the outdoors. What part of the monument would you recommend exploring that isn't too physically strenuous? Let's see. I would say the Redbud Trailhead off Highway 20 on Cache Creek. The Redbud Trailhead to Baton Flat would be good. Um, that one is fairly easy. You can opt to stop at the top of the hill where you're looking down at Cache Creek, or you can go down to Cache Creek, but elevation gain is not that strenuous. Um, the other is the Lynch Canyon Trail in the Cache Creek Natural Area. That one's a fairly broad double track former ranch road, really easy gradient down into uh, Lynch Canyon and the big flat that's down there. It's a beautiful flat. We call it Roadkill Cafe. It's a there's a there's an old hunting shack there that has a poster of what they're serving at the hunting shack, and it's called the Roadkill Cafe. So um, Smiddle Creek is one of those that's really good. I think I saw that in the chat that Jeff put there. And then the North Shore, the Lake Berryessa North Shore Trail.
Yeah.
Perfect. It's functionally level, but you wind in and out all of the little draws with beautiful views of Lake Berryessa, 15 different stone arch bridges. And in terms of dogs, yes, dogs are allowed on on the BLM land. Dogs are allowed off leash, but with voice control. On the Bureau of Rec, George, or Jeff, do you know if it's off leash or on leash? I forget.
I don't know.
I mean, they're allowed. I know that. So
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
not an
definitely.
issue.
I've seen them
Yeah.
there for
I mean, I
sure.
always have mine on a leash just because I'm like, get out of the star thistle, that kind of thing. But
Yeah.
but I've certainly taken mine on that trail. And also the other one that talked about for, family, the Zim Falls. You do have
Hmm.
to cross, the creek. When I say creek crossing, I'm talking about like maybe mid calf at deepest. So
At
it's
most,
not
yeah.
like, right. It's you'll get your footsies wet, but that's it. No one will be swept away. Um, and actually, the dogs that we've taken on that go nuts because they're like, "What? More water? Yay!" And then we go to the next creek crossing again, and so that one's a really good one as well. And then you'll find people, have dogs back there too when it's hunting season as well. So that's the only time that it's funny. I don't go back there like what is it, mid-August through September, which is when one, it's the hottest, but it's also deer season. Um, because I don't want to, get in anybody's sights, but it is a popular area for deer hunting in that area. But like I say, it's so hot. I'm like, you can have your month. I I don't need to get back there when it's September. Usually September is when I'm going up into the Sierra. So the question about the ideal flow rate out of Clear Lake to kayak Cache Creek through the wilderness, sit on tops work. Um, I use inflatables, which are functionally sit on top, but hard shell sit on tops would work. Anything self-bailing, you do not want to do a canoe, although we've done the whitewater canoes, but those have float bags and such. So here's what I've found for Cache Creek ideal releases. So I haven't done it in winter because it's so nice in the summer. Why be cold? People do it in the winter at really crazy flows, 3,000 CFS. I wouldn't do it like that. Um, but in the summertime, this is the thing about Cache Creek that makes me wonder why it hasn't really been discovered yet. And I don't know if it's because it's not, rugged enough for some people, or if everyone's just running it with outfitters, on the streams coming out of the Sierra. But you get water that's not ice cold, frigid, you're going to get hypothermia. You get no crowds, and it runs when the ag releases start for irrigation for agriculture down here in the valley. So South Fork of the American, as an example, only runs when they've got enough snowmelt. And it fluctuates during the day because it's a hydro source, and so they want to release more water when the electrical demand's higher, which is when it's hotter during the day when the AC is on, right? So people have to time their flows with that. Well, this isn't about generating electricity. This is about sending water down to the farms. So once it starts going, I can tell how much flow there's going to be based on where the crops are down here in the valley. So I know when the tomatoes are actively growing, I'm getting big flows. I know when they're starting to harvest the tomatoes, they're tapering off. So I keep my eye on the tomato fields. So functionally, what I find is best is during a normal year, of which this last summer was a normal year, we use about 150,000 acre feet of water out of Clear Lake. And the remaining acre feet needed for irrigation, which is just under another 100,000 for full deliveries, comes out of Indian Valley Reservoir. Indian Valley Reservoir water is a little colder. It's got a smaller watershed than Clear Lake. And the Clear Lake allocation that Yolo County gets is a slice of the lake. It's kind of cool the way it is. It's a slice, right? So we only get the water between two elevations. So once the water in Clear Lake rises up to a preset adjudicated level, we start accumulating water. And then once it reaches 150,000 acre feet, Yolo County has to release all the rest of that water out of the dam so that the communities around Clear Lake don't flood. So what that translates to is typically you will see anywhere between 120 to 200 CFS coming down the North Fork, which is where you put in off Highway 20 at the Redbud Trailhead. And you go down about 2 miles and it's very narrow and windy, and there's a little bit of overgrowth coming in because it's smaller creek. It's a North Fork of Cache Creek. And at the end of that 2 miles, you hit what's called the main stem, which is all the flow coming out of Clear Lake. That varies from between 500 CFS to 700 CFS during the summer irrigation months. Now you can find online a couple places. You can look at Dream Flows. That's one location. And you can also look at Yolo County Flood Control and Water Conservation District's webpage, and they will tell you their releases both from Clear Lake and from Indian Valley Reservoir. And then you add those two together, and that's the total amount you will get after you hit the confluence between the North Fork and the main stem. Now, during funky years, of which we've also had quite a few, there are times where there's not a full allocation in Clear Lake, but there's enough carryover water in Indian Valley Reservoir that they're kind of flip-flopped. So I've had it where there's 400 CFS coming down North Fork and maybe 200 coming down the main stem of Cache Creek, which is like totally reversed, right? That typically happens when you have like the first year of a drought year. So that means they have carryover water, so water from the previous year in Indian Valley Reservoir. So they have enough combined water for a full allocation. Um, what that means is it's a crazy ride down the North Fork at 400 CFS. You just zip through those 2 miles fairly quick. And then once you get the other 200 and the river widens and opens up in the wilderness stretch, then everything's fine. But the water is always a little colder coming out of Indian Valley. So those summers where most of the water is coming out of Clear Lake, it's coming over the top of the dam and the water's warm. It's like bathtub water. Then it mixes with the colder water of Indian Valley Reservoir, and it forms the perfect temperature for swimming when it's 95 degrees out. So when I was going down with my kids, they would always jump out of my boat and swim alongside, and then I'd have to pull them back in. We'd go down a rapid, then they'd swim a little, later. And camping in the Cache Creek Wilderness is spectacular. I usually do that wilderness run as an overnight. You can do it as a 1 day. It takes anywhere between 6 to 9 hours, depending on the flow. So the minimum combined flow that I would do is about 550 CFS. I've done it at 500. It takes a long time. I've done it at 900 and it's just sublime. 700 kind of seems to be my sweet spot where it doesn't go by too quickly, but it's not all the rapids have enough water that you're not, bouncing off rocks. Um, so I recommend folks do it. Take a look at Yolo County Flood Control's webpage. Take a look at Dream Flows. Look at what's coming out of Clear Lake, both Indian Valley releases and the main stem of Cache Creek. If you look at the Rumsey gauge for Cache Creek, it's pretty accurate of what you're going to get when the two come together, but you really do need to know how much is coming down the North Fork because there are times early in the season they might be sending 800 CFS down from the Clear Lake Dam, and it might be like 50 CFS down the North Fork, which is not enough to run the wilderness stretch. So in that case, I go a little further downstream to the confluence of Bear Creek and Cache Creek right off Highway 16, and I'll run the lower stretch. And that's what we call the fun run because it only takes like 2.5 hours to run. And you take that from the confluence there down to Camp Haswell County Park and pull out there. And the whole car shuttle's like 10 minutes for like a 2.5 hour ride. But it's fun because the river's, doing this and the highway just goes straight. So it's a real quick shuttle. But yeah, definitely recommend that. It's one of these where I say this area is like all seasons recreation. Fall, winter, and spring, there's always something to enjoy. Fall, you get the fall color. People think, there's no fall color up here. It's like, oh no, there's beautiful black oaks when you get up further up into the Mendocino. The California grape turns wonderful colors. The redbud turns colors. And then you get winter, which is when it's foggy anywhere down the Central Valley, if you can go up out of the fog and get into that nice, bright, crisp, clear air up there. And then spring, you've got all the wildflowers. And then summer, when it's too hot to be out there hiking, you're running the river. So you can be there all year.
Uh, any final questions for Andrew? All right. So with that, thank you everyone for coming, and we hope to see you in January when we resume our Nature and You lectures. And then be sure to check out our event page and come along on one of our hikes.
Or come out and help me build trails.
Oh man.
I've got a lot of backlog that I am ready to start hammering on. Berryessa Peak Trail needs a little love. Backside of Frog Pond, uh,
Yep.
Valley Vista. So I got a full palette for this winter. All
Awesome.
right. Well, thank you, everybody.
All right. Thanks, everyone.